Welcome to another Let's Build video. Today we're going to look at how to build subscribe button or subscription buttons for a podcast. And we're going to build them all from scratch in Thrive Architect for WordPress. So I actually built these buttons for the Active Growth podcast. So that's my other website apart from Thrive Themes. So on the Active Growth podcast, I thought that, in every show notes, every post we have with show notes, we basically want to put these buttons, and they're always the same, right? There's always the same links, same things. So I made a symbol with these buttons, meaning that I can place that symbol anywhere on my website, and if I ever need to update one of these links or update one of these buttons, I can just do it in one place. So it's very useful to have for a podcast. Now, let's get to building this. What I have here is I have a little container content box, and I'm going to start by dropping in 2 columns into this content box. So this is just a width restriction, right? This is just restricted to 500 pixels. That's all this containing box is for. So now we have 2 columns in here, and we can start putting more content boxes in those columns. The content box is a super important element for when you're building stuff from scratch. It's very, very useful to have. So the first thing we will do is layout and position. Let's get rid of the top margin. And we have a bottom margin of 20, which means if the space below is 20, what I want is on the columns, I want the space in between to also be 20. I want to have even spacing around the buttons, right? That's the first little detail. So then let's go to the content box and make it visible. So what we're going to do is first of all, I'm actually going to make this a white background. Right now this is a transparent background. So if you place this on something that is, let's say, red, then it would appear red. What we want it to be white no matter whether it's on a white background or not. So I'll make it white, then give it a border, and we'll make it just a very light gray 1 pixel border. And we give it rounded corners of, I don't know what that rounding is, maybe 6 pixels or so. Next up, let me put something in here. I'm going to use plain text, which is the right kind of text to use for anything that isn't content, if you're not writing content. So here I want to write subscribe on and Apple Podcasts. Then what do we have here? I'm not going to change the font or anything, but what we definitely have is this is larger. Right, the text is larger, and let's make it a bit darker. And then this here, maybe make it a bit smaller and lighter. So that's how we create very simple visual hierarchy. But then also, if I select the whole thing, the line height needs to be reduced so that they're closer together. And now, okay, that's starting to look like something. Now, for sure, what we can see right away is we need to add some padding to this button. So if we have the content box that this stuff is inside, we need to have some inside spacing here. And I don't know how much it is, but maybe 10 pixels. Let's say 10 pixels. Right now, it already looks much more like a button because the stuff is just stuck to the edges of it. Next, we need a hover effect. Let's do that also on the content box. Let's go into the hover state. And in the hover state, I simply want to darken it a little bit, like that. I want to keep it relatively subtle. There we go. Okay. Next up, this is an icon. We want an icon, and I don't know what these colors are, but let me just save this gradient as a favorite right here. So we have this gradient that I can just apply with one click. We go over here again. And now I want the icon. And basically this first one I'm building here is relatively simple because there is in fact an Apple Podcast icon. So this is in our icon library, which is included in Thrive Architect. This here is the Apple Podcast icon. And what I can do is, well, let's give it a background. We know that it has this gradient in the background, and the icon itself is white, and it's smaller. So this is 34 pixels, and it has some space around it. So we go to layout and position, and we put margins on it like this, and it has borders and corners, it has some corner rounding like this. And then it is left aligned. Let's get rid of the top and bottom margins. And then it floats. So this is in advanced. We have left aligned it. We can set it to float, which means that it will slip on the left side next into the same row as whatever is next to it. Last thing, let's add a margin here. Now this is, let me just add, let's say 10 pixels. And then we need to correct here. Let's make this smaller, maybe 20, because we do want it to fit on one line. And there we go. This is, I think this is the button pretty much done. Actually, there's one more element here, which is that the link is applied on this content box. So because this is kind of a complicated construction, and you'll see that some of the other buttons have some other elements to them, because of this isn't a button element, it's a content box element, which allows me to be a bit more precise about some things. And it allows me to put a layout inside it, but I can still treat it like a button by selecting the content box and then going to animation and action and adding a link. So here is where I would add my link to Apple Podcasts, right? So that would be whatever it is. I'm not going to paste that. I would paste in my link here, probably set it to open a new tab and then apply. So now when someone clicks anywhere inside this box, it will open that link just like a button. Now what's interesting is we can duplicate this, and the SoundCloud one is another example where, so if I go, this is very easy to do, right? Follow us on SoundCloud. Here all I need to do is replace the icon, because there is also a SoundCloud icon like this. And then also change that gradient. Again, I'm going to be lazy here. Actually, let me show you, right? What I actually do is I go to SoundCloud and I, check the hex values of their colors, and then just in background style, you choose your stops on this gradient right here, and you have some kind of darkish orange to lighter orange or yellowish. So this is how you basically manually create such a gradient, right? I'll just eyeball this, something like this, right? Close enough. Okay, that's how we get there. Then I would select this as well and go to animation and action and edit this link with a different link to my SoundCloud profile, apply that. But now it gets a bit trickier because, first of all, this shape of icon is something we can't do in CSS. We can't do this using kind of the border controls and stuff that we have here. And also the Stitcher radio icon is colored. We also can't do that. We can't have multicolored icons. So here we have to be a little bit creative. So let's duplicate this again, drop it in here. And now instead of an image, instead of an icon, I need to have an image. And the trick is simply to have the correct size. So what we have here is we have 34 pixels of width and height plus 8 pixels on either side. So that is 34 plus 16 makes 50 pixels. We have an image that has a total size of 50 pixels. That's basically all I need. If I have an image that's 50 pixels tall and wide, I can put it in here and it will look just right. So let's do that. Let's delete this icon, and instead we're going to add an image. And again, I'll place the image up here and I'll search for Castbox. Now I have one that is too large, but I can show you how to use this, right? This is 100 pixels by 100 pixels. So we insert that, and we want to make sure that there is no margin or padding around it, so no space around it. And then we simply reduce that to 50 pixels, right? Because we basically calculated that's the size it needs to be. Then we do the same thing. So in layout and position, we left align this and we make it float, and we add 10 pixels here. Oh, that was a mistake. I should have unlinked them first. So unlink and then add 10 pixels here. There we go. So now we have this button looking the same, but it's using an image while the others use an icon. And then we have a third case of the Stitcher radio icon which is constructed slightly differently. So here we duplicate this, and here we have Castbox, and then finally Stitcher. Here once again I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to add a new image, which is this here. And what's important here is that here the width, once again, we basically do our basic maths. We remove this stuff around it. We look at the total width is 68 pixels. We want that to be 34, because we're going to do the same thing as with the icons. So we have this 34, and in order to create a background, so we can't put a background on an image, but what we can do is add another content box. So we put a content box, let me put it below this image. Put a content box here. We make it 50 pixels by 50 pixels. That is the size of these backgrounds. We vertically center line whatever is inside it. We go to the background, give it a dark background. And we go to borders and corners and give it the corner rounding. And then we place our icon image inside this. And then we also want to center align this and remove top and bottom margins. And then same thing again. So we choose the content box, left line, float, and put 10 pixel margin on the side. So this is how we arrive at these buttons. And I wanted to show you this because I set out to build this and I realized that basically every one of these buttons presented its own little challenge. So here we have icon with a background, icon with a background, image, image inside a content box. But what we're doing is by using different ways of constructing this, we are arriving at a uniform look for 4 different buttons, even though we don't have the same kind of easy to use icon for each of them. So I wanted to show you this as an example of how you can find creative solutions for whatever design you want to create. And also this specifically is really useful because what you can do is this container that I started with. So right here, somewhere we see here content box. No, that's one too far. Content box, this one. This content box here is what you can save. So the content box containing all these buttons, you can save this as a symbol, right? So this is my podcast buttons or whatever. And you place this wherever you want these buttons. And if anything ever changes, if you ever update, you know, the branding or the location of your podcast, if you want to, you know, choose link to something other than Castbox or Stitcher or whatever in the future, you can just switch that out on the symbol in one place and it will automatically update everywhere where you've used these buttons. All right, thank you for watching this Let's Build video. I hope you enjoyed this relatively geeky build of the podcast buttons. Let us know if you enjoy this kind of content. We just want to show you some kind of live view of how to build stuff. And if you enjoyed it or if you have any ideas of what else you would like to see us build, just leave a comment below.